The man with two lives. Emma always believed she had the perfect marriage. James was charming, devoted, and successful. A man who promised her forever. Their love story had always felt like something out of a fairy tale. Until one night when everything changed. It started with a simple mistake. James had left his phone on the kitchen counter. Screen glowing with an unread message. "I can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again?" Emma's heart pounded in her chest. The message was from someone named A. She hesitated for a moment. Then her fingers moved on their own. She scrolled. The texts were careful, never too revealing, but the intimacy was undeniable. A restaurant reservation, a hotel booking, a midnight call. James was cheating. For days, Emma played the part of the oblivious wife. But behind the scenes, she was gathering clues. He had been taking more business trips, coming home late, smelling of unfamiliar perfume. But something didn't add up. Why did some of his supposed work trips not even match the locations his company mentioned online? Determined to uncover the truth, Emma did something she never thought she would. She followed him. One Friday night, when James claimed he had an emergency client meeting, Emma trailed his car through the city. Instead of heading downtown, he took an unfamiliar turn, leading her to a secluded house on the outskirts. He parked, got out, and entered the house without hesitation. Emma's hands were shaking as she crept closer. Through the window, she saw him embrace a woman, a beautiful brunette she didn't recognize. But then her stomach dropped. James wasn't just holding her. He was kissing her forehead, in a way that was different, tender, protective. Then, a little girl ran into the room. "Daddy!" Emma's breath caught. "Daddy?" James knelt and scooped the child into his arms, laughing like he belonged there, like he wasn't married to someone else. Emma staggered back, her entire world collapsing. He wasn't just cheating. He had an entire second family, a secret wife, a daughter. She wanted to scream, to burst into that house and demand the truth. But instead, she turned away, barely able to breathe. The man she thought she knew, the man who had promised her forever, he had been living two lives all along. And now, she had to decide. Confront him, expose him, or walk away, knowing she had never really been his only love. This combines romance, betrayal, and a dramatic twist. Exactly the kind of cheating story that keeps readers hooked. Would you like any changes or a different kind of twist? Smiling face with smiling eyes. Emma drove home in a daze, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. Her mind replayed the scene like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. A second family, a child, a whole other life. By the time she reached home, her emotions had cycled through shock, rage, and heartbreak. Now she was left with only one thought. He doesn't know that I know. She had power. That night, Emma acted normal. She kissed James when he walked through the door, asked about his client meeting, and even laughed at his jokes. But inside, she was planning. She had two choices: expose him, confront him, tear his world apart the way he had torn hers. Play the long game, make him suffer in a way he'd never expect. She chose the latter. The game begins. Over the next few weeks, Emma became the perfect wife. She cooked his favorite meals, wore the perfume he liked, and even suggested they take a weekend trip together. James, oblivious to her knowledge, fell right into the trap. She used every moment to dig deeper, checking financial records, tracking his locations, even secretly hiring a private investigator. The results were worse than she imagined. James had been married to the other woman for 6 years. Their daughter, Ava, was 4. He had bought the house in cash under a fake name. He had been living a double life, splitting his time between Emma and this second family, crafting lies so flawlessly that neither woman had ever suspected a thing. Until now, Emma didn't cry anymore. She didn't feel sorry for herself. She was too busy orchestrating his downfall, the betrayal he didn't see coming. One evening, James returned home to find Emma dressed in an elegant black dress, sipping wine by the fireplace. "Hey, babe," he greeted, setting his bag down. She smiled sweetly. "You should sit down. We need to talk." James hesitated. Everything okay? She slid her phone across the table. The screen displayed pictures of him and his second family, laughing, hugging, sharing a life. James went pale. Emma, She raised a hand, silencing him.
No excuses.
No lies. Just listen. Then, she told him exactly how she was going to destroy him. She had already contacted both divorce lawyers and Ava's mother. His secret was out. His finances, frozen. His business, compromised. His reputation, about to be shredded. By the time she was finished, James was shaking. Please, Emma. I can fix this. She leaned in close, her voice calm, cold. You already did, by showing me exactly who you are. Then, she stood up, grabbed her pre-packed suitcase, and walked out, leaving him to watch his perfectly crafted world crumble around him. The aftermath. 2 weeks later, Emma sipped coffee at a beachside cafe. Divorce papers signed, bank accounts secured, and James left with nothing but regret. She smiled as her phone buzzed. A message from Ava's mother. Thank you. You saved us both. Emma finally felt free. And James? Well, he lost everything. Because in the end, the cheater never wins. What do you think? Want to add another twist? Smiling face with horns fire. The man with 2 lives. James had lost everything, his wife, his money, his business. His second family had left him too. Ava's mother, furious and humiliated, cut all ties and filed for full custody. His life unraveled at an alarming speed. He called, he begged, he sent emails. Emma ignored them all. She was free, or so she thought. One evening, she returned home to find her front door slightly open. Her heart pounded. She had changed the locks. No one should be inside. She grabbed a heavy vase from the entryway and stepped inside cautiously. The house was dark, silent, until a voice made her freeze. Emma. She turned. James stood in the shadows, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. How did you get in here? She demanded, gripping the vase tighter. He let out a dry laugh. You really think you won? Emma's blood ran cold. Something about his tone felt off. Like a man with nothing left to lose. You took everything from me? He whispered, stepping closer. So now, I have nothing to be afraid of. Emma took a step back. Her fingers hovered over her phone in her pocket, ready to dial 911. But then a knock on the door. James stiffened. Emma seized the moment, darting past him and yanking the door open. A man stood there. A stranger, tall and serious. Emma? He asked.
I'm Detective Carter.
We need to talk. James bolted. But before he could reach the back door, 2 officers stormed in, pinning him to the ground. Emma was shaking. What's going on? The detective pulled out his phone and swiped through images, documents, crime reports, and one picture that made her stomach drop. A body. A woman. This isn't just about cheating, Emma, the detective said grimly. James has been living more than 2 lives, and his secrets are far darker than you know. Emma's world shattered again. James wasn't just a liar. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a killer. The man with 2 lives. Emma's hands were trembling as she stared at the crime scene photo. The woman's face was barely recognizable. Her body twisted unnaturally. Her throat felt tight. I don't understand, she whispered. Who is she? Detective Carter studied her reaction carefully. Her name was Vanessa Clark. She was reported missing 2 weeks ago. He paused. She was also seeing James. Emma's stomach turned. Another woman. Another secret. But this time it wasn't just cheating, it was murder. She glanced at James, still pinned to the ground by the officers. His face was twisted in anger, but not surprise. Not fear. Emma. Don't listen to them, he shouted. They're trying to set me up. But Emma wasn't buying it. She had spent months uncovering his lies. Now, she wasn't sure if she had ever known the man she married. You had another affair? She spat. And now she's dead? James shook his head wildly.
No.
I swear, I didn't kill her. But the detective ignored him. Instead, he turned back to Emma, his gaze sharp. We have evidence that James was with Vanessa the night she disappeared, he said. Phone records, witnesses, and... He hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket. Plastic evidence bag. Inside it was a bracelet. Gold. Delicate.
Familiar.
Emma's breath caught in her throat. It was hers. The one she had lost weeks ago. Her mind raced. How did Vanessa have this? She looked at James, who had gone deathly still, his face pale. You recognize it, don't you? The detective asked. Emma nodded slowly. It's mine. The detective exchanged a glance with his partner before asking the question that would change everything. Emma, where were you the night Vanessa disappeared? The truth is never simple. A chill ran down Emma's spine. Me? She said, laughing nervously. You can't seriously think. You had a motive, Carter interrupted. James cheated on you, lied to you, destroyed your life. And Vanessa? She was just another one of his secrets. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. No, this wasn't happening. I didn't even know about her, she argued. Why would I? But then, like a puzzle shifting into place, memories surfaced. The night Vanessa went missing, Emma had been drinking. A lot. Rage and betrayal had burned inside her, consuming her thoughts. She had driven somewhere. She had confronted someone. There was yelling, crying, and then blackness. She remembered waking up in her bed the next morning with a headache and an overwhelming sense of dread. Something had felt wrong, but she had pushed it aside. Now, looking at the evidence bag, she felt sick. James had cheated. James had lied. James had destroyed her life. But had she killed Vanessa? The man with two lives. Emma's breath came in short gasps. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. The detective's stare was sharp, unrelenting. Where were you the night Vanessa disappeared? The question echoed in her mind. She wanted to answer. I was home. I was asleep. I didn't even know her. But the truth was, she didn't remember. James, still pinned to the floor, laughed. A low, bitter chuckle. See, detective? He sneered. Emma's not as innocent as she seems. Emma whipped around, fury overriding fear. Are you seriously trying to pin this on me? You were the one sneaking around with her. You had every reason to want her gone. James held her gaze, something dark glinting behind his eyes. Maybe, but if you didn't kill her, Emma, then why was your bracelet found at the crime scene? Silence. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. He was right. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. Unraveling the past. Detective Carter didn't let up. Emma, I need you to think carefully. The night of Vanessa's disappearance. Do you remember anything? Where you went? Who you saw? Emma squeezed her eyes shut. Flashes. A dimly lit parking lot. A woman's voice, angry, scared. A struggle. The sensation of falling or pushing. Her stomach twisted violently. I don't know, she admitted. I was drinking. I was angry. I remember getting in my car. But everything after that is blurry. The detective exchanged a look with his partner. You were seen at a bar near Vanessa's apartment that night, he said carefully. Security footage caught you leaving around midnight. Emma's heartbeat roared in her ears. Midnight. That was when Vanessa's phone had last pinged. I don't remember going to her apartment, she whispered. I swear I don't. James smirked. Convenient. Shut up, James, she snapped. But panic was setting in. What if he was right? What if she had been so blinded by betrayal that she had done something unspeakable? What if she had killed Vanessa? A new suspect. Detective Carter studied her reaction, then made a decision. You're coming with us, Emma. Her body went cold. What? Not under arrest, he clarified. But until we sort this out, we need to bring you in for questioning. Emma's legs felt like jelly, but she forced herself to stand tall. Fine. As they led her toward the door, James called after her, voice dripping with mock sympathy. See you soon, sweetheart. Emma didn't look back. The shocking discovery. At the police station, Emma was left in a small interrogation room with a cup of stale coffee. The minutes dragged. Finally, Detective Carter returned, his face unreadable. "We found something," he said, sliding a file onto the table. Emma hesitated before opening it. Inside was a photo. Not Vanessa. Not James. A man, bruised, bloody, slumped in an alleyway. Emma's ex-boyfriend. She gasped. "Liam." Carter nodded. He was attacked a week before Vanessa disappeared. Beaten so badly he ended up in the hospital. He never reported it. But we pulled up security footage. The person who attacked him. He flipped another photo onto the table. "James." Emma's blood ran cold. "James beat Liam?" she whispered. Carter nodded. "And that's not all. A neighbor of Vanessa's reported hearing an argument the night she went missing. Two voices. A man and a woman. The man was angry. Violent." He paused. The woman was begging. Emma's hands clenched into fists. "James. It had to be James. He wasn't just a cheater. He wasn't just a liar. He was a monster. And she had been married to him. The trap." Emma took a shaky breath. "You think James killed her?" Carter met her eyes. "We do. But we need proof." Emma's heart pounded as an idea formed. "What if I can get it?" The detective frowned. "What do you mean?" Emma leaned in. "James thinks he's won. He thinks I'm falling apart. But what if I pretend to forgive him? What if I get him to confess?" Carter hesitated. "That's dangerous." Emma's voice was steel. "I don't care." James had destroyed her life. Now, it was her turn. The man with two lives. Emma could barely keep her hands from shaking as she left the police station. The plan was reckless, dangerous, but necessary. James thought he had won. He thought she was weak. But now she had something stronger than revenge. She had a trap. Step 1, the reunion. That night, Emma did something unthinkable. She called James. He answered on the first ring. "Emma?" His voice was laced with amusement, arrogance. She took a deep breath. "I made a mistake." Silence. Then, carefully, "What kind of mistake?" Emma forced herself to sound vulnerable. Defeated. "I should have believed you." "The cops?" She let out a fake, shuddering sigh. "They tried to turn me against you. But I know you didn't kill Vanessa." Another pause. Then he exhaled, almost relieved. Finally, "Jesus, Emma. I've been trying to tell you." She cut him off. "Can we meet?" He hesitated. "Where?" "Somewhere private." She lowered her voice. "I just want to fix this." James took the bait. "Tomorrow night. My place." Perfect. Step 2. Setting the stage. The next day, Emma met with Detective Carter in secret. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, handing her a tiny recording device. Emma nodded.
James thinks I'm weak.
"He'll talk." Carter's jaw tightened. "If he so much as raises a hand, we storm in." "Understood." She smirked. "Oh, I'm counting on it." Step 3. The truth comes out. Emma arrived at James's apartment just after 9 p.m. He greeted her with open arms, the same charming smile that had once fooled her. "You have no idea how happy I am to hear you say that," he murmured, pulling her into an embrace. She let him hold her, let him think he'd won. For the next hour, she played her role perfectly, asking about the case, pretending to be scared, gaining his trust. Then, carefully, she said, "James, if you didn't kill Vanessa, then who did?" James tensed. "I told you. The cops are setting me up." Emma sighed, shaking her head. "I don't know. The evidence is stacking up. The phone records, the witness, my bracelet." James stiffened. "That's not my fault." "But it was at the crime scene," she pressed. "And I lost it weeks ago. So how did Vanessa get it?" James's expression darkened. His fingers curled into fists. "She stole from me, Emma. She went through my stuff. That's how she found out about you." Emma's stomach twisted. "She knew about me?" James exhaled harshly. "She was never supposed to find out." He ran a hand through his hair. "I told her it was over, but she wouldn't let it go. She threatened to tell you. She said she'd ruin my life." His voice lowered into something dangerous. So I made sure she couldn't. Emma's heart stopped. James, she whispered, keeping her voice steady. What did you do? He sighed, rubbing his temples. It was an accident. A confession. Emma's pulse pounded. She glanced at her purse, where the tiny recorder was capturing everything. James kept talking, unaware of the noose tightening around his neck. She was screaming, saying she'd go to the cops, that she had proof. His jaw clenched. I just wanted her to shut up. I grabbed her. She fought me. I pushed her. And she hit her head. Hard. Emma felt sick. And then, James met her gaze. For the first time she saw it, the monster beneath the mask. I panicked. Took her body to the lake. Made it look like she ran away. He exhaled sharply. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Emma's fingers shook as she reached for her purse, pretending to fidget. Almost there. Just a few more seconds. But James noticed. His eyes flickered to her bag, his face twisting with realization. You bitch, he growled. Emma lunged for the door, but James was faster. Step 4, the endgame. James grabbed her wrist, shoving her against the wall. You think you're smart? He hissed. Think you can set me up? Emma struggled, but his grip was ironclad. His eyes were wild now, completely unhinged. You ruined my life, Emma, he seethed. I should have finished this the moment you started snooping. Emma's mind raced. Carter said they'd come if he got violent. But how long would that take? She needed to stall. James, she gasped. Please, we can fix this. For a second he hesitated. Then crash. The front door burst open. James barely had time to turn before Detective Carter tackled him to the ground. Officers swarmed in, shouting commands. James thrashed, roaring in fury. Emma collapsed against the wall, shaking. It was over. The aftermath. 2 weeks later, Emma sat in the courtroom, watching as James was led inside in an orange jumpsuit. He refused to look at her. She had testified. The jury had heard his confession. The evidence was airtight. He was done. A life sentence. As the judge read the verdict, James finally turned toward her and smiled. Not a look of regret, not fear, just amusement, like he knew something she didn't. Emma's stomach twisted. Outside the courthouse, Detective Carter caught up to her. You okay? He asked. Emma nodded slowly. Yeah, I think so. He studied her carefully. Something wrong. Emma hesitated. James was gone. Locked away. He couldn't hurt anyone anymore. So why did she still feel like the game wasn't over? She forced a smile.
No.
It's nothing. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling. James wasn't done with her yet. The man with 2 lives. Emma wanted to believe it was over. That James was locked away for good. That she could finally breathe again. But his smile in the courtroom haunted her. Like he knew something she didn't. Like the game wasn't over. The first warning. 2 weeks after the trial, Emma returned home to find an envelope on her doorstep. No return address. Just her name. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 3 words. Check your car. Her breath caught. No, it's a joke. A prank. Still, dread coiled in her stomach as she stepped outside and approached her car. The moment she opened the door, her blood ran cold. Sitting on the driver's seat was a gold bracelet. Identical to the one found at Vanessa's crime scene. A bracelet she never owned. Her pulse pounded. Was someone messing with her? Or was James still pulling the strings? Even from behind bars? The second warning. Emma ran straight to Detective Carter. This was on my car, she said, slamming the bracelet onto his desk. He examined it, frowning. You're sure it's not yours? Emma shook her head. It's the same style, the same exact look. But I've never seen this one before. Carter leaned back in his chair. James has no way of contacting anyone. His calls are monitored, his mail is checked. If this is him, he's got help. Emma swallowed hard. So what do we do? Carter's eyes darkened. We find out who's working for him, before it's too late. The twist no one saw coming. That night, Emma barely slept. Every sound outside made her flinch. Every shadow in the corner felt too dark. At 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her stomach clenched. Don't answer. Don't answer. Her finger hovered over the decline button. Then, against every ounce of common sense, she picked up. She put the phone to her ear. Silence. Then a breath. Slow. Controlled. And a voice she thought she'd never hear again. "Miss me, sweetheart?" Emma's blood turned to ice. It was James. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. He chuckled. "Ah, come on, Emma. You didn't really think you could get rid of me that easily, did you?" Emma's body was frozen, her mind screaming for logic. "He's in prison. He can't be calling me. He can't." But then he spoke again. And this time it was worse, because he whispered something that no one but her, could possibly know. Something from a night she had tried to forget. Something that could destroy her. And then the line went dead. Emma's phone slipped from her fingers. No, this wasn't possible. James was in prison, locked away. His calls were monitored. He couldn't just pick up a phone and whisper her darkest secrets into her ear. But she had heard him. And what he said, it was impossible. Because the secret he whispered was from a night she didn't even remember. The night that changed everything. Emma sat in Detective Carter's office. Her hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles were white. "I got a call," she said, her voice hollow. Carter frowned. "From who?" Emma forced herself to look up. "James." Carter stiffened. "That's impossible." He grabbed his phone, dialing the prison. A few tense moments passed before he spoke with the warden.
James Porter?
"He what?" Emma's stomach twisted as she watched Carter's face darken. He hung up and turned to her, jaw tight. "James hasn't made a single phone call since his conviction." A chill slithered down her spine. "Then how did I hear his voice?" Carter exhaled slowly. "Either someone's messing with you," his eyes narrowed, "or James isn't the only one keeping secrets." The unfinished puzzle. Emma sat in her car outside her apartment, gripping the steering wheel. She replayed the call in her mind over and over. "You didn't really think you could get rid of me that easily, did you?" And then the whisper. A memory she had buried so deep, she wasn't even sure it was real. "You shouldn't have been there that night, Emma." Her breath hitched. That night. Vanessa's murder. She wasn't supposed to be there. But James knew she was. And if he knew, what had she done? A dangerous lead. Determined, Emma drove across town to the one place she swore she'd never return to. Liam's apartment. Her ex-boyfriend opened the door, looking as surprised as she felt. "Emma?" His eyes flickered with hesitation. "Why are you?" "I need to know what happened the night Vanessa died," she interrupted, stepping inside. Liam stiffened. "Why would I know?" Emma's heart pounded. "Because James attacked you a week before. Because Vanessa was scared. Because I think you know something I don't." Liam looked away, jaw clenched. "Emma, you need to let this go." She grabbed his arm. "Tell me the truth, Liam. Was I there that night?" Liam hesitated, then finally sighed. "You don't remember, do you?" Emma's world tilted. Liam rubbed a hand over his face. "Emma, you weren't just there. You were the last person to see Vanessa alive. The memory that was never lost." Flash. Vanessa's apartment. Tears in her eyes. Her voice angry, desperate. "You don't understand, Emma. He's dangerous. I have proof." Emma's own voice shaky, afraid. "If that's true, then go to the police." Vanessa grabbed her arm. "You have to help me." And then, the door burst open. James. His eyes wild, his hands clenching into fists. And then nothing. Emma's breath came in shallow gasps as she stared at Liam, her head spinning. She was there. She had seen everything. And somehow, she had forgotten. Or worse, someone made her forget. To be continued? Smiling face with horns fire. Did James manipulate her memories? Was she involved in Vanessa's death without realizing it? And who is helping James from the outside? Emma's heart raced, but her mind was caught in a whirlwind of fragmented memories. She had been there. She had seen it all. But there was a piece of her past. A piece she couldn't recall. Liam looked at her, his eyes filled with sorrow. You were terrified, Emma. You knew he was dangerous. And you tried to stop him. Emma's voice barely escaped her lips. Tried to stop who? James. A cold shiver ran down her spine. But Emma didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to know. What had she done? The final confrontation. Later that night, Emma stood before James's prison cell. She couldn't breathe. She had come to face the truth, to demand an explanation, but she wasn't ready for what he would say. The guard unlocked the door, and James stood up, his smirk as cold as ever. Back for more, sweetheart? He taunted, eyes gleaming with something dark, something vindictive. Emma stepped forward, her voice shaking but strong. You know what I remembered. He tilted his head, an amused chuckle escaping him. Oh, I know you have, but you don't know the whole story, do you? Emma swallowed hard. Tell me everything. James leaned against the bars, the smirk fading into something almost sad. You were so perfect, Emma, so full of potential. You never asked the right questions, though. I always knew that. I could control you. Your fear, your love, your desire. Shut up, Emma whispered, tears pricking her eyes. I didn't know. I was manipulated. I was blind. James's gaze softened for a moment, almost as though he felt pity for her. But then the smile returned. You think you were the only one manipulated? I did what I had to do to survive. Survive? Emma gasped. You murdered Vanessa. You killed her. His expression darkened. You're wrong. You killed her, Emma. Emma's world spun. She staggered back, her breath hitching.
No.
I couldn't have. James stepped closer, his voice low and cold. You don't remember, do you? After she begged you for help, after she tried to warn you about me, you were the one who hit her. You were the one who shoved her, knocking her into the table, making her lose consciousness. No. Emma's legs gave way beneath her, and she sank to the ground, the weight of his words crushing her.
No.
She gasped, shaking her head. I couldn't have. James's voice was cold as ice. You did, Emma. You were the one who didn't let her get away. You were the one who let her die. The room seemed to close in around her, suffocating her. She tried to block it out, tried to convince herself that it wasn't true. But deep down, she knew. He was right. The tragic end. As Emma walked out of the prison, the world felt like it was collapsing around her. Every step was heavier than the last. She had been used. She had been manipulated. But now, she had the truth. And it was worse than she could ever have imagined. But there was one last question that lingered. Why? Why had James done this to her? Why had he allowed her to believe she was the victim? She sat down on a park bench, feeling numb. The wind blew through the trees, but she didn't feel the chill. A sudden realization hit her. She had been nothing more than a pawn. A way for James to control Vanessa. A way for James to destroy her life. And now, with Vanessa gone, there was only one thing left for him to do. Destroy her. Emma's eyes blurred with tears as she reached for her phone. She needed to speak to Detective Carter. She needed to warn him about James's true power. But as she dialed the number, a cold chill swept over her. A shadow loomed behind her. Did you think I'd let you ruin everything, Emma? She turned slowly, dread filling her chest. It was James. But this time he wasn't in prison. He was standing in front of her, free. And in his hand, there was a gun. The final betrayal. James's smile was haunting. You think you're the one in control? You think you're the hero in this story? Emma's blood ran cold. She had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. You were always mine, Emma, he whispered, his voice filled with satisfaction. And I'll make sure you never forget that. Emma's heart raced as the gun in his hand aimed at her chest. But before she could react, there was a flash of movement, a loud shot, and then nothing. The aftermath. Detective Carter found her the next day, alone in the park, her life extinguished with one final bullet. James was nowhere to be found. The only thing left was a single, haunting note in her hand. You were always part of my plan. The end. A tragic ending. A victim of manipulation and betrayal, Emma's story comes to an unbearable close. James's shadow will always loom over her, even in death. And the truth? It was never about revenge. It was about control. The end, or perhaps the beginning of something even darker. Smiling face with horns.